Julia Roberts has been one of Hollywood's biggest stars for over 30 years. With her famous smile and warm personality, she became known as America's sweetheart. But behind all the fame and success lies a story of struggle, heartbreak, and incredible strength. Julia was born on October 28, 1967, in Smyrna, Georgia. Her parents, Walter and Betty Lou, were actors who ran an acting school that welcomed both black and white children during a time when the South was still segregated. This brave stand for equality caught the attention of civil rights leaders Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, who helped pay Julia's hospital bills when she was born. But life at home was not easy. Money was tight, and her parents' marriage was falling apart. When Julia was only 4 years old, her parents divorced. This was devastating for the little girl who loved her father deeply. Soon after, her mother married Michael Motes, and the family home became a place of fear and tension. Neighbors later said that police were called to the house several times because of domestic problems. The family moved around a lot, never staying in one place long enough for Julia to feel settled. She developed a stutter as a child, struggling to speak clearly because of all the stress and fear around her. Teachers noticed that she was quiet and seemed to shrink away from others. She would only overcome this speech problem years later through therapy and acting. In 1976, Julia's half-sister Nancy was born, but this only added more stress to an already troubled family. The children learned to walk carefully around the house, never knowing when the next fight might break out. For Julia, home never felt like a safe place. The worst tragedy came in 1977 when Julia was just 10 years old. Her father, Walter, who had been the one bright spot in her difficult childhood, died of throat cancer. He had hid, and his illness from Julia to protect her, and then suddenly he was gone. This loss was crushing for the young girl who had already experienced so much pain. Before he died, Walter had made cassette tapes of bedtime stories for Julia. After his death, she would listen to these tapes every night, playing them over and over until they wore out completely. These recordings were her only connection to the father she had lost, and she clung to them desperately. At school, things were no better. Other children made fun of Julia's wide smile, calling her names and making her feel ugly and unwanted. The same smile that would later make her famous was once a source of deep shame and hurt. But even through all this pain, Julia discovered something that would change her life. Acting became her escape and her strength. When she pretended to be someone else, she could forget about her troubles for a while. Her voice grew stronger, and she began to find confidence she never knew she had. When Julia was 17, she decided to chase her dreams in New York City. She arrived in 1985 with almost no money, a small bag of belongings, and huge hopes. The city was brutal to her. She lived in tiny, freezing apartments with broken heaters. She often went hungry, stretching cheap meals to last for days. When she couldn't afford subway fare, she walked for miles through the snow in worn-out shoes. Getting work was incredibly difficult. She was rejected over 200 times by casting directors and agents who barely looked at her before saying no. But Julia refused to give up. She kept telling herself to try again, no matter how many doors slammed in her face. During this time, Julia faced one of the most heartbreaking decisions of her life. She was so poor and hungry that she had to sell her father's antique watch, the last precious thing she had from him. Taking it to a pawn shop felt like losing her father all over again. Years later, when she became successful, she went back and bought the watch, keeping it as a reminder of how far she had come. Her first small break came with a commercial for acne medication. It wasn't much, but it gave her a union card and proof that she belonged in the acting world. In 1987, she got a tiny part on the TV show Crime Story. She showed up to work with a fever, but was determined not to miss the opportunity. During filming, she was burned by special effects, but she kept going anyway. Her first real movie role came in 1988 with Mystic Pizza. It was a small film, but critics noticed her energy and presence. The famous movie reviewer Roger Ebert called her a major beauty and predicted she would become a star. Then came Steel Magnolias in 1989, where she played a young woman fighting illness. Julia wasn't the first choice for the role, and she faced harsh criticism from some people on the movie set. But she used all her memories of loss and pain to create a performance that felt completely real and moving. At just 22 years old, Julia won a Golden Globe Award and was nominated for an Oscar. All those years of struggle, rejection, and heartbreak had prepared her for this moment. She had turned her pain into art. Then, in 1990, came the movie that would change everything, Pretty Woman. The script had originally been a dark, sad story, but Disney turned it into a modern fairy tale. Even then, Julia almost didn't get the part. The movie company went out of business, and she had to audition all over again. When Richard Gere wasn't sure about working with her, Julia wrote him a note that said, "Please say yes." He did, and movie history was made. Julia's paycheck for Pretty Woman was much smaller than her male co-stars, showing how unfairly women were treated in Hollywood at the time. But when the movie came out, it became a massive hit, making hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide. More importantly, it made Julia Roberts a household name. Her smile, her laugh, and her charm captured hearts everywhere. But success brought new problems. Julia became engaged to actor Dylan McDermott, but the pressure of fame destroyed their relationship. She discovered that being famous meant belonging to everyone and no one at the same time. The constant attention from photographers and reporters made it almost impossible to have a normal private life. Julia tried to avoid being typecast by taking on different kinds of roles. She made Sleeping with the Enemy, where she played a woman escaping an abusive marriage. The emotional weight of the role stayed with her long after filming ended. She also made Dying Young, a love story about loss, and appeared in Steven Spielberg's Hook as Tinkerbell. Each role was challenging in its own way, and Julia often struggled with the pressure and expectations. By the late 1990s, Julia had become the queen of romantic comedies. Movies like My Best Friend's Wedding, Notting Hill, and Runaway Bride made her one of the most popular actresses in the world. These films spoke to people about love, friendship, and second chances. Julia's characters were often flawed and real, which made audiences connect with them even more. The biggest milestone came in 2000 with Erin Brockovich. Julia played a single mother fighting against a powerful corporation to help people who had been poisoned by contaminated water. For this role, she became the first woman in Hollywood history to be paid $20 million, breaking barriers for all actresses who came after her. The movie was a huge success, and Julia won an Oscar for her performance. Standing on the Academy Awards stage, she was so overcome with emotion that she laughed and cried at the same time. "I'm just a girl from Smyrna, Georgia," she said, reminding everyone of how far she had traveled from her difficult childhood. Throughout her career, Julia's love life was often in the spotlight. She had brief relationships with actors like Liam Neeson and Jason Patric. In the early 1990s, she was engaged to Kiefer Sutherland, and their wedding was planned as one of the biggest events in Hollywood. Invitations were sent out, flowers were ordered, and the whole world was waiting to see her walk down the aisle. But 3 days before the wedding, Julia called it off. The reasons were never fully explained, but she knew in her heart that it wasn't right. The decision shocked everyone and created a media frenzy. The wedding dress hung unworn, the flowers wilted, and Julia had to deal with her heartbreak in front of the entire world. She later married country singer Lyle Lovett in 1993 in a surprise ceremony, but this marriage lasted less than 2 years. It was another attempt to find the love and stability she had always craved, but it wasn't meant to be. Everything changed when Julia met cinematographer Daniel Moder while filming The Mexican in 2000. Daniel worked behind the camera, not in front of it, and he saw Julia as a person, not just a famous actress. Their relationship began quietly, away from the spotlight. When Daniel's previous marriage ended, he and Julia were free to be together openly. On July 4, 2002, Julia and Daniel were married in a small, private ceremony at her ranch in New Mexico. This time, there were no photographers, no crowds, just wildflowers and open sky. Julia had finally found the peace and love she had been searching for her entire life. With Daniel, Julia had 3 children, twins Hazel and Phineas in 2004 and Henry in 2007. Becoming a mother was the most important role of her life. She often said that waking up with her family was better than any movie role or award she had ever received. Julia and Daniel bought a ranch in Taos, New Mexico, where they could raise their children away from Hollywood's chaos. She also had homes in Malibu and other places, but these weren't just expensive houses. They were sanctuaries where her family could live normal lives. As Julia got older, she became more selective about the movies she made. She appeared in films like August Osage County, where she played a daughter dealing with family problems that reflected some of her own childhood experiences. She also moved into television with shows like Homecoming, proving that she could excel in any medium. Throughout her life, Julia faced personal losses that she kept private. When her half-sister Nancy died in 2014, Julia grieved quietly, rarely speaking about it publicly. She also had a difficult relationship with her brother Eric Roberts, who struggled with addiction and legal problems. But when Julia became a mother, she and Eric slowly began to rebuild their relationship, especially when he met her children for the first time. Today, at 57 years old, Julia Roberts lives mostly in Malibu with Daniel and their children, who are now young adults. She has been careful to protect their privacy, rarely allowing them to be photographed or interviewed. Her estimated net worth is between $250 and $300 million. But she measures her wealth not in money, but in the love and stability she has built with her family. Julia maintains her health through yoga, swimming, and long walks. She eats well, protects her skin from the sun, and takes care of herself both physically and emotionally. She has learned that taking care of herself is not vanity, but necessity. She continues to work on projects that matter to her, but she no longer feels the need to prove herself. She has also used her fame to support causes she believes in, often giving money and time to help others, usually without seeking publicity for her generosity. Looking back on her life, Julia Roberts' story is one of incredible resilience. She started as a little girl in a broken home who lost her father too young and was mocked for the very features that would later make her famous. She survived poverty in New York, countless rejections, failed relationships, and the intense pressure of fame. But through it all, she never gave up. She turned her pain into art, her struggles into strength, and her wounds into wisdom. She proved that it's possible to rise above a difficult beginning and create a beautiful life. Julia Roberts changed Hollywood by becoming the first woman to earn $20 million for a movie role, opening doors for other actresses. But more than that, she showed the world that authenticity and vulnerability could be just as powerful as glamour and perfection. Her famous smile, once a source of childhood torment, became a symbol of hope and joy for millions of people around the world. Her movies made people laugh, cry, and believe in love again. She proved that even someone who seems to have everything can struggle with the same fears and hopes that we all have. Today, Julia Roberts is no longer just America's sweetheart. She's a woman who has lived fully, loved deeply, and survived everything life threw at her. She found her happy ending not in a movie script, but in real life, surrounded by the people she loves most. Her legacy isn't just the movies she made or the records she broke. It's the proof that no matter how dark your beginning might be, you can still create light. No matter how many times you fall, you can still get back up. And no matter how much the world might try to define you, you can still choose to define yourself. Julia Roberts turned her wounds into light, and that light continues to shine, inspiring others to find their own strength and create their own happy endings.